Hello and welcome to ATP Insights, where we cover the most important tech stories and tech news in Asia. Today is Monday, the 30th of March, 2026. Let's get right to it. I want to start with how the real AI bottleneck in Southeast Asia, and frankly, probably in the whole world, is actually not a model, but power. I want to do a little bit of Ask Michael Anything, and then later in the program, we'll be joined by David Lynch, the Group Chief Technology and Operating Officer at bolttech, to explore how agentic AI is transforming embedded insurance, particularly as more businesses look to integrate protection directly into digital journeys. Followed by Leon Lim, the CEO and founder at Groundup.ai, to discuss how cognitive AI is reshaping facilities management and predictive maintenance of those facilities. And finally, Khoa, the CEO at Eyes of AI, will join us to dig into the impact of AI on healthcare in general and dentistry in particular. Okay, let's talk about how power is the real bottleneck in Asia for AI. What may turn out to be the most underrated Southeast Asia story right now is not software. And this is probably true all over the world. When we do our AGTP episodes, you hear us talk about this all the time. SoftBank has invested a ton of money, not just in OpenAI, but in the power that's going to help drive all of the artificial intelligence data centers that they run and that NVIDIA runs as well. Because underneath all this excitement about artificial intelligence, cloud infrastructure, and regional data transformation, a harder and more consequential question is starting to force itself into the open. That is, where exactly all this electricity going to come from? And you may or may not know this, but data centers are now getting outbuilt. Office space in the United States is now getting outbuilt by data centers. I don't have the statistics for that's happening in Asia yet, but boy, it would not be shocking if that were actually the case. And that question about where all this electricity and where all this power is coming from is now becoming impossible to ignore across Southeast Asia, as governments across the board in every country are competing for AI-focused data centers while also dealing with a much more fragile energy environment. According to AP, published on March 26th, countries including Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines, that's all of Southeast Asia, that's what I should have just said, are all revisiting nuclear power plants as electricity demand rises and energy security becomes uncertain. We don't have to mention why. You watch the news, you know what's going on out there. AP also reported that more than 2,000 data centers, I say this all the time, but wrap your head around that. 2,000 data centers are already spread across Southeast Asia, with more still in development. And for years, much of the tech conversation in Southeast Asia has centered on platforms, software adoption, mobile payments, e-commerce, logistics, and now AI. But AI infrastructure changes this discussion drastically for all the obvious reasons, right? Data centers are not like consumer apps. They're physical. You can see them. You can go up to them. You can knock on the front doors of them, but they're power hungry and they're always on. Like when you're not using your consumer app, it's not doing anything. Okay, sometimes it's operating in the background, but not at the same scale as an AI-enabled data center. These are real industrial style assets. And once countries decide that they want to host that infrastructure at scale, we've already mentioned that all of them really do. There's a lot of money to be made there, but there's also a lot of benefit of having these AI data centers in your country. They're no longer just making a digital policy choice. They're making an energy policy choice as well, and an industrial policy choice, and in some cases, a geopolitical policy choice too, right? Because to the extent that you can be power independent, it changes the context and the surface of geopolitics. Again, for better or for worse, it just does. The big point here, and again, I don't think it's in Southeast Asia, but that's the focus for today's discussion, is that AI is really beginning to expose the difference between digital ambition and just the ability to be ready to actually handle it, right? 5 years ago, everybody's talking about digital transformation. That's neat and that's great, but you didn't need the same level of power and distributed power or even concentrated power that you do need if you want to have these massive AI data centers. It is simple. You could probably do it lying in bed to announce or to introduce an innovation hub. Everybody wants to be an innovation hub. Don't get me started on big white elephant buildings that are built to be innovation hubs, okay? But it's much harder to provide dependable, just kind of baseload electricity for server farms that cannot tolerate outages, have to be up all the time. They cannot have any bottlenecks at all. And like I said, they always have to be available, and they cannot be like earthquakes can't hurt them, weather can't hurt them. They have to be resilient. These things have to be completely available all the time. You don't want to be working on something and have the data center where you're working on this thing go down, particularly if your CDN is down as well. And in Southeast Asia, that challenge, again, as the region tries to become like more self-sufficient, is becoming more urgent. The IEA, so the International Energy Agency, says the region is on course to account for 25% of global energy demand growth by 2035. And its electricity demand is projected to rise from more than 1,300 terawatt hours today to above 2,000 by 2035. Within a 5-hour flight of me, there are over 5 billion people. So just think about that. That's not all of Southeast. That's not only Southeast Asia. That also includes China and India. But again, just think about how much power is going to need to get generated here as all of those populations. China's a little bit further ahead, but not much. But it's all those populations where GDP per capita actually starts to get higher. Because there must be some one-to-one or some direct correlation between GDP per capita growth and the necessity for always available energy. So this is not some small nuclear store only. This is about what happens when the AI build-out collides with the realities of just the entire grid needing to be upgraded. Where does the fuel come from? And how important is national resilience? Again, to Indonesia, to Malaysia, to Thailand, to the Philippines, even to Singapore, right? Which is just a small island just below Malaysia. On March 23rd, Reuters reported that Vietnam signed an intergovernmental agreement with Russia for construction of a nuclear power plant with 2 Russian designs totaling 2,400 megawatts. Here we go. Okay, nuclear power. And this is a significant step for a country that halted earlier nuclear plans in 2016. Okay, not that long ago, less than a decade ago, actually almost a decade ago, yeah? And has now returned to them amid rising power demand and concern about future supply security. Look, the world is in a fragile state. And one of the reasons why having peace globally is important is so that the free movement of goods can actually happen in a way that's frictionless and seamless. And one of the goods that's the most important good that gets traveled around the world or sent around the world is energy, oil, stuff like that, yeah? The Philippines is moving on this as well. Official government reporting in February said Manila aims to begin accepting nuclear license applications in 2026. That's this year, in order to stay on track for integrating nuclear into the energy mix by 2032. Malaysia is also revisiting this issue. Recent reporting says that government is reviewing the country's potential nuclear energy program with official discussion around bringing atomic energy into the mix in the early 2030s as demand from data centers and broader economic growth accelerates, right? This is the point. You cannot get away from needing more energy as long as your economies are growing. And in Southeast Asia, if you don't think the economies 10 years out are going to be bigger than they are today, you're reading off the wrong song sheet. Thailand as well, according to AP's reporting, set a target last year of adding 600 megawatts of nuclear generating capacity by 2037. You should also know that Thailand is super great at generating solar energy, not just rooftop, but regular solar energy as well. And Indonesia, meanwhile, has incorporated nuclear energy into its planning as well. And they want to start building some small reactors by 2034. This is happening everywhere. None of this means, I think, in my mind, that Southeast Asia is suddenly becoming like all nuclear all the time. But I mean, we talk about this a lot. Nuclear energy is clean. And executed properly, it's pretty safe as well. As always, there are some obstacles here, right? Nuclear projects can tend to take a lot of time. But if governments are behind it, right, I think this can happen actually quickly. Sure, there was Fukushima. I remember I was in Japan when this happened. And yeah, it was scary. And actually, one of the reasons why I left Japan to move to Thailand was because of the Fukushima accident. Chernobyl was way before most people that are actually watching this video or listening to this show don't even know what happened in Chernobyl. But I was not in Chernobyl, but I was cognizant of it happening. So you have to have all of these things really need to be disintermediated. All of the issues or all of the memories that people have of these two pretty big nuclear problems need to be disintermediated. But I think we're way further ahead in the safety of nuclear power than we were even just 10 years ago or 15 years ago, which is when Fukushima happened, right? 2011. And that's why the most important reading of this stuff, this move or this kind of testing out of nuclear power, is that it's not the answer to everything. There is no like golden key here, okay? But there never is. There never is. But it is the case that artificial intelligence is forcing governments to admit the scale of, hey, maybe we don't have enough energy. Maybe we have, it's not that we haven't planned for it properly. It's just that maybe we didn't anticipate the fact that the rollout of artificial intelligence and the data centers that are needed to run it were just going to happen at such an accelerated speed. And I think it's making the governments regionally rethink about what their energy policy is and what the energy infrastructure needs to be like in each one of their countries. So in the last cycle, many emerging markets could talk about digital transformation and still treating energy as kind of like this separate discussion. It was there, but it wasn't as important. But that separation now, as we mentioned earlier, is going to become really, really hard to maintain because you just need way more energy to run these data centers, right? AI, a country that wants hyperscale data centers, AI training clusters, and everybody wants this, right? Advanced manufacturing, which Thailand definitely has. A resilient cloud infrastructure also needs unstoppable power, grid upgrades, backup systems for all this stuff, just in case something happens to the main power, better transmission, and just a better long-term fuel policy. But it's not just like where we're going to get power in 2030, which frankly is only like 3.5 years away now. It's more like where we're going to get power in 2050. And how can we estimate how much power we need? I mean, I bet if you ask ChatGPT, it could make a pretty good estimate, which gets back to this whole thing. And there's a kind of another layer here, I think. Energy security across Asia has become more fragile, not less. And I think this is true for the whole world as well, but we're talking about Asia, so let's focus on that for now. There were reports this week that the war in Iran has sharply disrupted global liquid natural gas markets, with Asian LNG prices surging and supply expectations worsening. I mean, this was just going to be part of the outcome of this war in the Middle East. AP separately reported that several Asian countries have already been leaning more heavily on coal, which is not great for the environment, as gas markets tighten. But I mean, you have to make a price decision. And as long as you can switch, these things are not completely fungible, but as long as you can switch, okay. We didn't ask for this, to be fair. The world seemed to be working pretty nicely before somebody wanted to start a war in Iran. In that environment, the appeal of nuclear going forward, right, is not difficult to understand. It offers domestically strategic source of large-scale generation that's not exposed in the same way that imported fossil fuel volatility is. It's just not. So the idea here is that when Southeast Asian governments go back to revisit nuclear power like they're doing right now, this is not even a climate issue at any level. I mean, it's okay, right? Like I said, nuclear power is very clean. So it's definitely better than having like a coal-fired plant somewhere to create energy. But there are three things going on right now. Rising electricity demand, and that's not going to end. Again, it's not just the AI data centers. There was going to be a long-term trend to more energy use, to more energy needs in Southeast Asia, just because the populations themselves are just getting wealthier. And the wealthier people get, the more energy they consume. That's just a fact. The region itself wants to be more part of this digital ambition and digital transformation that is just marching ahead one step at a time globally. And then the rising insecurity in the global food markets. And I mean, in the global fuel markets, but in the food markets as well, those prices are going to rise too. For the past 2 years, AI coverage has often been dominated by models, chatbots, and product launches. But where we reside in Southeast Asia, the more important story is going to be infrastructure. It's not going to be about which company has the best demo, which country can build. It's going to be about which country can build the best foundation for compute-intensive growth, and that's going to include power. Because in the end, right, AI doesn't run on headlines. It runs on chips, substations, and power. And if Southeast Asia is now reopening the nuclear conversation, it tells you something important. The region itself, on an individual country basis and on a regional basis as well, is beginning to understand that the next phase of the digital economy will not be won by software alone or by individual apps or even by individual companies. It is going to be shaped by who can deliver stable power, and electricity at scale, with enough resilience as well built in to support economic growth and a strategic economy. Okay, I wanted to do a little bit of Ask Michael Anything today, and there's all this noise out there. And look, I've commented on this before. I don't personally think that humanoid robots are going to be the be all and end all. I don't understand, even inside your house, right, to do the laundry or to even cook dinner or whatever. Why does it need to look like a human? In a way, I feel like that's a worse experience. But there are companies out there developing them, and it's more than just like the development of a humanoid robot. I think what I want to talk about here, and I was reading a few stories around this, right? And the real idea here, okay, is that China is going all in to beat the U.S. on humanoid robots. Okay, that's the story here. And this is an article that I read in the Wall Street Journal. I've read a couple of other articles about this as well. But what I really wanted to ask myself was, is this purported lead, right, in humanoid robots really about artificial intelligence or not? Like, what is it really about? Is it about manufacturing scale or industrial policy? And for me, take a step back and look at this. China's advantage here is not that it has better frontier AI than the U.S. It may or it may not. But I mean, some of the biggest and best models are being developed in the United States. Fair enough. It is that China appears to be combining good enough embodied AI with the things that usually decide industrial winners. Like, what are they, right? That's supply chain depth, manufacturing speed. This is important too. State-backed financing, subsidized facilities, a government that's actually interested in being involved in not just looking at the future, but building that future. This is important. The Chinese government is paying attention to technological advancements and making investments as well, or particularly the subsidized facilities. And you need to have the ability, and if you look at most of the supply chain stuff, for the electronics that you use, a lot of it comes from China. A lot of it. Okay, even if it's not designed by them, it's built by them. I mean, the iPhone is the perfect example of this, right? And even the chips that TSMC builds, Apple's chips are built by TSMC, and Intel's chips are built by TSMC as well. Because building a fab is expensive and highly sophisticated. But according to the Wall Street Journal, China has more than 140, and it's probably more than this, humanoid robotics firms and very significant policy support from the government. Companies such as Unitree, which we spoke about last week or the week before, Agibot and Ubtech are already shipping meaningful volumes, not tons, but I mean, they're pumping them out of the factories and they're putting them out in people's homes and they're testing them there. And that would suggest to me, again, getting back to, is this an AI thing or an industrial policy thing or a manufacturing thing? It's not about the AI model that's actually sitting inside these things, but who can industrialize robotics first? You have to ask yourself the next question, which is, does dominating humanoid robotics matter economically, or is this still a story about a speculative technology? So I think there are a lot of things to learn here. Again, I don't want a humanoid robot I'd love to have a robot in my room. I'd love to have a robot at home to do a bunch of different things. Frankly, I hate doing laundry, but I do it almost every day. I don't cook for myself, but if I had a robot here who could cook, I would buy the ingredients and do that, for sure. But does this humanoid robot thing actually matter? I mean, it matters if they become a general purpose labor platform. But as I said, like, that's not really proven right now. The economic significance for me lies less in like near term, I got a robot in my house, and more in the stuff that it takes to actually get them there. Stuff like factory automation, warehousing, repetitive industrial tasks, and structured service environments, places where they can do it. But again, I don't think those robots are going to be humanoid. There's a lot to learn because humans are very sophisticated. Just take a look at your hand for a while and look at how your joints move around. That's hard to manufacture. Look at the robot on screen here. That dude does not have hands. He's got a spatula for a hand because he's meant to be somebody that's cooking, I think. I can't tell. He's also wearing a cowboy hat, which to me looks ridiculous. But anyway, if China establishes leadership at that layer, right, can we do this factory automation stuff? Can we repeat industrial tasks using robots? It could strengthen manufacturing competitiveness overall in the same way that its dominance in batteries, solar, and EV supply chains did. I mean, we mentioned this yesterday. I tweeted about it yesterday. BYD sells way more electric cars, electric vehicles, whether they're HEVs, so the hybrid electric vehicles, or just the fully electric, the battery electric vehicles, the BEVs, than any other car company in the world. Yeah, more than Tesla. By far, Tesla's sales are falling and BYDs are growing. And remember, BYD is restricted from selling cars in the United States. You got to wonder why. Anyway, but if they can do that, if they have the same plan there that they had in EVs, something big's going to happen. And this leap from these impressive demos, if you like the humanoid robot thing, is still uncertain. We're not sure, right? Is that if people actually want these things in their homes, it feels a little intrusive. Is it recording you? Like you have no idea what's going on inside these things. But the second thing is this strategically important already? Or is the final commercial shape of the market settled yet? And I don't think it is. I think there's a lot to learn by building these robots, but I don't think that a lot of people are going to want to have robots in their house that look like humans. We already have plenty of robotic stuff happening. I mean, to be fair, our washing machine is robotic, but it looks nothing like a human. Imagine if we had just taken this idea and built a human robot that actually took your clothing and rubbed it up against a washboard. That would have been ridiculous. But that's kind of what this is suggesting. But on the flip side, what do you learn? Right? What do you learn from building something that's that sophisticated and that complex? That to me is where the big benefit is. And China is still way ahead there. So is there any weakness in this argument that China is actually winning this race? Well, they may be. And let's suggest that they are. We know they're ahead in EVs, right? But let's say they're ahead in these humanoid robotics. And I would back up and just say robotics, right? But is it long-term sustainable? I mean, I would suggest for the longest term, the Japanese were way ahead in robotics. The Chinese are racing past, yeah? The Chinese are definitely ahead on cost. Supply chain integration, what they have is way better than anything that's going on in the United States. Early deployment. But these humanoid robots, like I said, they still have some unsolved problems. The hands is the biggest thing for me. I don't like the way they look, right? How autonomous can they be? How durable is that? Is it actually safe? What if it bugs out, right? And what kind of AI stack, just from a software perspective, is going to be necessary? Like, well, let's say a fire starts in your kitchen and the robot, it's like, what is it going to do? Does it know how to do that, or does it just know how to cook? All these little things, and that's not such a little one. But all these little things actually need to be solved. And I have seen reports that even China's champions still face some important technical bottlenecks. Including dependence on advanced chips and the difficulty of making robots truly capable outside of controlled settings. So that's kind of important. But just think about how sophisticated and complex the human brain and the human body is. Remanufacturing that over time is way further off than you think. I don't care about the demos that we've been seeing, right? But the question that we asked here was, is China's leading this sustainable? I don't know. It's early innings, right? You could have said 5 years ago that Japan was going to win this thing. Who knows? It's too early to tell. But the final question here is, if China is running the EV playbook in humanoid robots, what should the U.S. do? And what can they learn from that? Well, the first thing that I would say is, come on, USA. First of all, the U.S. should stop acting like it has extreme ADHD and learn how to focus on the things that really matter. And the U.S. should also stop treating robotics as only a lab or startup issue and start treating it as industrial infrastructure, industrial scale infrastructure. China's apparent approach resembles, as I mentioned earlier in this segment, its electric vehicle strategy. Subsidized capacity. Or these companies may or may not have to make money. Support your domestic champions. Create an environment inside your own country where the testing can take place to do this, but also where there's actual real industrial applications for what's getting built. Have standards, stimulate demand, right? And scale manufacturing before the market is so mature that you've already lost, right? I mean, are solar panels even manufactured in the United States at all? Probably not. They're probably made in China. So recent responses in the United States have focused on security risks, including proposed restrictions on Chinese humanoid robots in government use. This would be a bad idea. Somebody should teach the US government about the Trojan horse. It may look like a gift, but you should really know what's going on inside. Okay? And defense alone is not a strategy. If the US wants to compete, it needs not just better AI models, but stronger robotics supply chains, component ecosystems, industrial adoption pathways, just ways for companies to figure out how they can actually use these things, and a clear commercialization policy. Otherwise, America may invent key parts of the future while China manufactures and deploys them. We'll be right back with our first guest. Okay. David, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Doing well down here in Melbourne today, so good to be here again.
Super duper. Okay, let's just jump right into this. Where is AI creating the most meaningful leverage in embedded insurance today?
I think we're in an exciting landscape with embedded insurance, and bolttech's been at the very forefront of a lot of the innovation taking place.
For sure.
In terms of the meaningful impact, I think I like to think of some areas such as intelligent distribution, where we're finding ways to serve up the right protection product at the right time with the types of B2B customers that we deal with, whether that's a bank, a retailer, a telco, a super app, or an e-commerce marketplace. The way in which those different customer archetypes work, we've got to think really contextually about where insurance is embedded into their journeys. And it's not the same for a telco as it is for, say, a bank. There are differences. I think beyond that, we're also seeing examples where protection products are playing a really key role in the overall value proposition of a product. So when you think about something like a warranty, for example, it's a really core part of what an OEM selling when they sell a device to the market. So if they can really accentuate the features that are provided in that warranty and know that there's peace of mind in having a provider like bolttech in the background there when that protection is needed, that's creating tremendous value, I think, not only for the OEM, but also for the end customer.
Can we jump in a little bit and just see where, because again, just your perspective is going to be very different from the audience's perspective, right? And I was writing down as you were saying this, like these different customer archetypes. And I was thinking as you were talking, it must be different. Look, you use telcos and banks as an example, right? They're like at opposite ends of the spectrum. So maybe if you could give like an example of how it's different and how it's used and stuff like that.
Well, I think if you think about it from a banking perspective, where I spent a lot of my career, the bank assurance model of the old days was very human-led, very human-driven. And even think about things like credit cards. Credit cards have, for a very long time, have had insurance products wrapped into the proposition, particularly things like travel insurance that's been there. But we've seen a really big shift and interest in things like online safety and cybersecurity. People are really concerned about their digital identities. And I think if you look at the role that a bank typically plays, customers have got a very, very high expectation around safety and security. So I think there's a very natural tendency to look at products like our online safety offering in that segment. Take, for example, a retailer that's out there selling white goods and IoT devices. Their initial onboarding point could be a warranty or an extended warranty product that is sold in the retail store and distributed very differently to a bank assurance product. So there's definitely nuances to those needs.
What is the reaction you're getting? Because I talk to a lot of people about building AI products, right? But then getting them actually to institutions that want to use them and understand how to use them, right? And I'll get to governance in a second because I do think that that's important. But what kind of reactions are you getting as bolttech continues to develop these embedded products? And you're right, you guys were early on this, you guys dominated this, but now that you're adding the AI into it, what have been some of the responses, again, from your banking partners, from your e-commerce partners, from your telco partners, when they're like, we may not be ready for this yet, or how can we get ready for this, or what do we have to do to make sure that this is going to be okay?
I think one of the things that we've been trying to unpack for our partners is to show this shift that is going on right before our very eyes, where the industry that we operate in has always thought about insurance from the viewpoint of financial liability transfer. It's a product that is there when you need it, when you have to make a claim. But with this shift that's happening with the underlying data sources, generative AI, agentic AI, we are in a position now where we can create more intelligent protection products. And I say the word protection because it's more holistic than just insurance. When I say protection,
Yep.
we're helping our customers to think about how these more intelligent products harnessed with AI can prevent adverse events or losses from ever occurring. And that is a win for the insurer. It's a win for the distribution partner. It's a win for the end customer, because if we can prevent those adverse things from happening, everyone benefits. So that's really where we're seeing the buy-in. Once there's a really deep understanding that's the end goal that we're pushing towards.
Are we getting to the point where the agentic AI and even the generative AI, right, given enough data, can actually create a customized product on the fly? Do you know what I mean? Like in the same way that if you're talking to a human agent, that agent may have an idea and say, oh, this kind of configuration may be better for you. Are we at a point now where the agentic AI can react in real time and say, there's a better way to build a product just for you based on all the stuff that I know about you and people like you?
I think that's definitely where it's heading. The concept of hyper personalization and protection is definitely going in that direction. I think if you constrain yourself a little bit just talking about insurance, I
Yep.
think one of the biggest challenges the industry's got is the legacy applications that run the entire insurance industry. Still, many of the big players are running on mainframes or AS400s that don't really lend themselves to that kind of dynamism in terms of underwriting and risk. But we are seeing that shift happen. And I think partly it was the conversation we had just now around that broader concept of protection, that many of these new protection services that are being built not only by AI, but with AI embedded in them,
Yep.
are not burdened or constrained by those legacy policy admin systems. And we're seeing the emergence of the need for an orchestration layer
Yep.
that sits across that myriad of services and then is able to orchestrate very deep in each of the protection verticals as a real opportunity to help the industry move at a much faster pace around this than ever before.
So does this give you leverage as a CTO, right? To look, I know there are big legacy systems out there. We've talked about this. When I was at Goldman Sachs, we had massive legacy systems, right? But we spent a lot of time and a lot of money actually replacing this type of server with that type of server. And I chuckled before when you said the AS400 because I actually managed a few of those when I was at Morgan Stanley. So it just made me laugh. I didn't want people to think I was laughing at you. I was laughing with you. But does it then give CTOs, not just you, but across the board, the leverage to say we may need to invest in new hardware as well, and maybe move some of our legacy systems off of that hardware onto new hardware so that we can actually get the full benefit of what artificial intelligence can offer us?
Well, I think on the compute side, we've seen massive increases in the availability of technology at our fingertips. So the GPU performance,
Yeah.
well, I think also in just the sheer magnitude of the compute capacity that we've got through the hyperscalers that we work with every day.
Yep.
I know at bolttech we feel very fortunate to have no legacy physical infrastructure. We're a cloud native company and have been since the very
For
beginning.
you guys, for sure.
But that's not true of some of the partners we work with. We know the carriers are burdened by that,
Yep.
and I think that's also partly where agentic AI is playing a huge role. So, historically, we've seen in some of the markets we operate in, some insurance carriers don't even have APIs today.
Right.
That's just a fact in terms of where the industry's at.
Yep.
So, the emergence of things like MCP as a protocol is really opening up different opportunities for not only faster speed of integration, but just different ways of integrating where we can deliver those integrations at a much faster pace.
Mm-hmm.
It's an exciting time in the industry, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking it's kind of a little bit off topic, but I was thinking like even for guys like you and guys that are like you are like I am, we've seen all these little different technology cycles. I feel like this is the most exciting one we've ever seen. Is that fair?
Unbelievably so. It's just feels like every single thing that we're doing now is compressed into a much
It's weird.
shorter
Yeah.
cycle of change.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I used a quote about a year back, AI, everything, everywhere, and all at once. It's basically taking that movie title.
Exactly.
And I know that sounds like we as an industry are not focused if that's what actually is going on. But
Yeah.
let me tell you, that is actually what is going on.
Yeah, and it's nonstop as well. Like this is, I think, the first piece of technology or the first sort of technology ecosystem that I've seen where it's like never off in a way. It's like always changing and growing, particularly on the agentic side where stuff is always happening. You can go home at the end of the day. When I was at Goldman Sachs, it's like you were kind of done, right? But it's like the market being open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and constantly trading billions of dollars of equities. And you're just like, when is this ever going to stop? That's what it must feel like to you guys, no?
It absolutely does. And you reminded me of something I was looking at in the last 24 to 48 hours. It was a map of what Claude, as an example, has shipped in the last 30 days. And it is just mind blowing.
It's insane, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk, just for people that may or may not understand this, just what that orchestration layer looks like and how it's interacting? Do you know what I mean? Where it sits in the process that you were discussing and why it's so significant? Because this orchestration stuff is really important. To me, the orchestration layer is kind of like, it's like the avenue into everything else that's getting done. And that itself has to be managed too, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you a good example
Please.
of that. I think when we think about our business model, one of the things that is a little bit unique in regard to it is the... Sorry.
It's okay. It's a great ringtone, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll give you an example on that in respect of one of the ways we think about orchestration is in recovery. So recovery is often a process that's triggered when a customer has to make a claim.
Yep.
And something that's really fundamental to our value proposition in an area like device protection is our ability to get a replacement device in the hands of a customer in a promised number of hours. That's something that really helps us differentiate. And we've got a physical supply chain that does that. So in order to do that, we are orchestrating across an inbound claim, a customer service agent that could be a human agent or an AI agent. We're also orchestrating across warehousing and logistics and delivery providers. And in many of the markets we operate in, we use a myriad of third-party service providers for logistics.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we want to understand that device actually successfully gets into the hand of the end customer. So this orchestration layer is not just about orchestrating across the myriad of APIs and microservices that we have internally. There's often third-party services that we need to orchestrate across as well. And some of those are online and some of those are offline. And it's the combination of those things that gives us the ability to weave all of that together into a seamless customer experience. So I think that's one really strong example in our business.
It's so interesting. Like, I think most people don't think about companies like bolttech as having a physical presence as well. But you're right, this recovery is really important, particularly if you're insuring and covering devices that either break or get broken. Because at some level, that has to go through you and then go through some supply chain and logistics company to get back to the end customer, yeah?
That's right.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so complicated and complex. Like, it's not just about insurance, right? There's so many other things that are connected to it. And I guess in some way, the orchestration layer is one of the things that makes it easier or more seamless to do that, yeah? Because now connecting those things together is actually better, no? Not worse, for sure, yeah?
Well, I think in addition to the example I gave you, if we think through each protection vertical, whether that's auto mobility or in the home or in pet, the other trend that we're seeing with the proliferation of IoT devices is a myriad of real-time data streams.
Yeah.
And part of the secret sauce, I guess, in our architecture being event-based architecture is we've got to be able to orchestrate across all of those data streams happening in near real time in order to predict that the adverse event is going to happen so that we can prevent it from occurring. And we need to be able to do that with a form of intervention. So intervention could be some education for the end customer. It could be a haptic alert on a smartwatch. It could be something that's served up into a smart home application. That orchestration has to be able to work across all of those different types of scenarios and technology.
I love this. It just makes it so much more interesting to me. Can we talk a little bit about the regulatory environment as it applies to rolling out these new technologies, particularly the agentic AI stuff or just the AI stuff at scale? Because you guys operate in so many different, cities, towns, regions, countries, and stuff like that. What are some of the complexities or some of the challenges of having to deal with the regulatory environment in all these different places for things that could get governed differently across the board? Yeah. And then I'll let
I
you
think
go.
I think there's a few trends that we see around that.
Go ahead.
The regulators often would like to see more certainty around
Yeah.
the things that AI is going to do, and understand the existence of good governance and guardrails, and all of those things are certainly taking place. I think agentic AI brings in some additional complexity from the regulatory viewpoint. So, in a world where we are far more deterministic and predictable, as has been the case with previous generations of technology, it's quite easy, relatively speaking, for the regulatory landscape to make sense of that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we go into the world of agentic AI, where it's perhaps less deterministic,
Yep.
I think it introduces different forms of risk. And it's taking time, I think, for regulation to be formed and to catch up to where the actual technology is. And I think the other trend that we see a little bit too, MCP is an interesting protocol,
Yeah.
and also agent to agent protocols. Are we entering a world where we just blindly trust agents to be able to talk to other agents to execute tasks? I think that to a regulator is very, very scary.
Yeah.
So we're not yet at a stage where there's a universal trust protocol that regulated industries like banking and insurance can adopt seamlessly across an entire ecosystem to be able to have that level of trust that's out there. So I do think there are genuinely some regulatory challenges, but I think all of us as participants in the industry are certainly here to help the regulators understand this and to come up with very practical guidelines and regulations that support progressing the industry forward at a good pace.
Okay, you brought something up. I said I was going to let you go, but this is the last thing I ask you. I always do this to you. I promise, though. I will thank you after this. Because you talked about, like, are we going to allow agents to these agentic AI to, like, talk to each other and make decisions on their own? And I like to make analogies to the physical world, right? You have plenty of people that report to you, and at some point they're having conversations with each other, and they're like, I don't know, we really can't decide that thing on our own. We need to ask David. And it's not always you, but you know what I mean? You're like the proxy for some senior manager somewhere. How do we build that into the agentic part too, where they maybe have some leeway, like you said, guardrails to speak to each other, and then they're like, we're not sure what the outcome of this is going to be. Maybe we need to ask some kind of super agent or actually get a human involved.
Yeah, I love that question, and I think I can think of so many examples where practically that's come up as a topic. So, one thing I think we've got to accept as humans, that we will always have a degree of skepticism or fear
Yeah.
in regard to new technology. Some people have, of course, got less fear around that than others, but
Yep.
I think that some of the examples that are playing out, generally speaking, starting with lower risk, more certain type of use case scenarios, gives the humans in the loop confidence that the agents are not running completely off track or doing things that they shouldn't be doing. I think that there's other scenarios as you get into higher impact decisions or processes where the instrumentation around what we're giving the agents is also super critical to make sure that the human still is in the loop and there is a level of supervision. I think for anyone who's actually gone out there and built an AI agent and has tasked it to execute a task, you can very quickly see some of the shortcomings where there are no guardrails. And I even know from my own personal experience, not just in the context of bolttech, some of the agents that I've built are incredibly good at what they do, or almost too good at what they do in some respects. But you've got to keep guiding them to deliver the exact outcome that you're looking for. And I don't think we're at a stage
Not
yet where human out of the loop interactions with most of the agents in a regulated industry is going to be happening that soon into the future. Probably ultimately we will see that happening, though, as these agentic systems develop.
Got it. Okay. I will let you go. Thank you so much for coming on and doing this today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks a lot. Great to be with you again.
Always. Leon, thank you so much for coming and joining us today. We wanted to have you here because we wanted to talk about how cognitive AI is reshaping facilities management and predictive maintenance. But before we do that, Why don't you tell us a little bit about Groundup?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Groundup, we are serving the industrial sector. So what we do is we help companies to prevent unplanned downtime, to give transparency on their machines. So we do that through installing our proprietary solution, right? It's a sensor, but more importantly, it's the whole system on the back end. We call it agentic AI,
Okay.
right? So by being able to retrieve data from the machines, we can perform diagnosis on the back end. We can give a very nice prescription all the way. We call it end to end, from detection all the way until prescription.
Okay. So this is really cool. And look, I've been having conversations about predictive maintenance for years, right? Installing IoT sensors everywhere. You know, I've heard water is like the most dangerous thing because it's incipient and it creates the most damage. And it's more often like water leakage leads to some problem than fire because fires are rare. But how does agentic AI change this ability to do predictive maintenance, preventive maintenance, and like where does cognitive AI fit in? Like what's changed in the last, I guess, year or so that makes this just so much more powerful?
So before we came in with our cognitive maintenance solution, right? Every single customer that we visited has some form of existing IoT sensors.
Yeah,
right?
they
So
must
that's
have,
the
right?
current state. Yeah, exactly. So they already have some form of data acquisition. Now the real problem is not collecting the data. The real problem that we see is how do they make sense of this data. So in fact, they spend so much of their resources, their talents, their manpower, trying to collect all this data, but they are not maximizing the use of it.
Got it.
Yeah, so that's the first thing that we saw.
Okay.
And second thing is how do we put in intelligence that is not just smart but scalable? Yeah, so that's the next idea, right? How do we take this and then across the factory floor or across the pods, how do we give intelligence into every single machine? Yeah, so that's where the cognitive part have to come in, right? You can't do it just by collecting data, right? And you do like AI per machine.
Yeah.
Right. You can't analyze it per machine, right? It takes too slow. Then you might as well send a human on the ground anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
But how does it, like, what is the actual output? So let's say now you've mentioned this before. You went to all your potential customers. They all had IoT sensors in there. They were all already collecting data, but just understanding what that data meant and actually having it, the response to that scale was hard before there was agentic AI and cognitive AI. But what are we allowing these agents to do now that they can actually go and analyze the data? Do you know what I mean? Or is it just sending information back to people that are managing these facilities and saying, hey, machine number 7 or whatever it is, like something inside there is going to break. Like, do you know what I mean? Like what exactly is it doing? And what, I don't want to use the word autonomy because I'm starting to hate that word, but like what kind of ability does it have to like do stuff on its own, which is autonomy anyway. I said it. Sorry, go ahead.
We like to call it having like a senior engineer in your pocket. So you just imagine what the senior engineer would tell you, right? So for example, our AI can also do the same thing. Our AI can say that, okay, based on the data that I've studied for the past 1 week or 2 weeks, right? I know your machine has a trending failure, right? So I know when it was spoiled. I will tell you that it's going to be spoiled, 7 weeks down the road. And it has a 99% chance that it's spoiled because of the bearing looseness.
Yeah.
You see, so it goes very accurate to a point whereby it's like a specialist. Some people call it like a diagnosis person. You send it for an X-ray, right? It comes out to you. You can know every single thing about your machine. So it has that power now. Previously, without cognitive AI, it's just too draining to do that. You have to manually study it.
So does that mean that the jobs, because this is really interesting, right? There's all this noise out there about how everyone's going to lose their job, and I don't believe this at all. And I'm on record as saying this. I've been saying this for years. But it just means the nature of the job and the scale of the job, that the people that are analyzing this data is now going to change, right? Because now they're not analyzing the data necessarily on their own, but they can actually act quicker, faster, and smarter because the analysis is kind of getting done to them and sent to them. So the nature of their job is changing a little bit, no, or a lot. Do you know what I mean?
So there's two major changes, right? So the first one is previously they, like a lot of it is manual work, right? You have to walk down, open the black box to check.
Yeah.
Right now, the nice thing is everything gets sent to you. So firstly, it's very time saving, right? You can get better people on board because the really great engineers, who wants to walk the ground every single day, sadly saying, right?
Yeah, particularly in a big facility, right? Like in a big manufacturing facility or a big industrial facility, nobody wants to walk from, point A to point B if it's 100 meters or 200 meters away every single day, right? Just to check something.
Exactly. And then if something happens in point C, point D, You have to travel to another place, this place, to consult, and then you go back, right? So one day at most you can do maybe 4 to 5 analysis, right? But now you get every single thing sent to you in volume, in bulk, right? Your role changes. So instead of just being the one who is analyzing, now you can do the prioritization role. So I think that's more meaningful. So you can look strategically, not just operationally. You can say that these are 1,000 of my machines. Which one do I need to focus my attention on? Right. So one of the customers, right, they told us it's a funny thing. Like, it's like having 1,000 children all the time. Some of the children cry more than the others, right? You want to focus on solving the one that cries the most. You don't want to split your time equally. So he said that at home he has like 5 kids.
Yeah.
Those that are not, there's only one problematic child that costs all his time. So he said that should be the nature of how life works, right? You find the problem quickly rather than going to figure out where the problem is. I thought that example was quite good.
That's really good. That's not the example that I was going to give in my head. Just so you know, here's the example that I had. I remember when computers at Morgan Stanley, which is where I worked when this was the case, those computers were not connected to each other. They were standalone machines that were literally plugged in on the floor underneath your desk, and you did all your work on them. It wasn't long. It was like 2 or 3 years after computers got rolled out onto everybody's desk that they started, doing local area networks and wide area networks, which are probably terms you've never heard before because you didn't need to know them. But once all those, say that again.
Yeah.
You have no idea. Anyway, there's a bunch of stuff I can teach you. I'm just kidding. But the point was that maintaining those computers on each individual's desk, if there was ever a problem, was a real hard task, right? Because, like you said, you had to walk to everybody's desk that was having a problem. And there was no way to roll out new software to everybody's desk because those machines weren't connected to each other. But once you had these local area networks and wide area networks, now all those machines are connected, which meant that you can now monitor all of them at the same time. So it's like you're having 1,000 children thing. But that's the example I was thinking of, which feels a little more relevant. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And I guess another good thing is now that you know the problem before you even go down, you can better prepare to fix the problem.
That's what I was going to ask you. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the key thing is, solving a lubrication problem on the machine is entirely different from a looseness, right, or a shaft misalignment problem. So you want the engineers to bring down the right tools for the right job, right? Previously, you bring that whole gunny sack of tools down. It's not just tiring, it's dangerous also, right? So now it's very focused. If you need a looseness thing, just bring the tool to solve the problem, just at its root.
Are you finding that in some of your biggest installations, right, that there are similar machines, so that if machine A, B, and C are all the same type of machine, that if machine A is having a problem, it's likely that B and C are going to come up and have a problem, and that you can actually be proactive? Or is there just so much data out there that you don't even need to be that proactive because the system that you have on the IoT side and the combination with the cognitive AI will just let you know when you actually need to go check it, so you don't waste any time going to check something that you would have checked otherwise?
Yeah, so I think the nice part about cognitive AI is you just let the data flow in. So previously they have to think of a lot of, how do I partition the data? What do I delete? What do I keep? This and that, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for now is let the water flow. Just let the data come in, right? So long as it passes through this like a water dam, right? Like a gateway, it passes through this cognitive AI layer,
right?
It will sort itself out. So a lot of the stress is taken away from how do I sort this data? Do I keep it properly? Right now, you don't have to keep anything properly. You just let the data flow through. The moment it touches this middle, I call it like a membrane layer.
Yep.
Right, it automatically diffuses and splits itself into the correct buckets. You see, so the stress, you're shifting, I call it the wrong stress into the right stress. Right, so they stress about the fixing, like the actual job itself, rather than collecting the data, trying to store, keep, figure out what to do with it in the first place.
So is this cloud-based or is it on-prem?
It is both.
It is.
So our current model, we can do both deployments. So one of our larger deployments, and I don't see this very often, to be fair. So I suspect it's something that maybe should be done more also. Yeah. So in our deployment for the Singapore Navy, that's our flagship client, the largest one.
Good for you.
Far. Yeah. We deploy on 8 of their flagship ships, right? So we are in almost all of their machinery besides the weaponry. So we don't do weaponry.
Good. Safer.
Safer. Yeah, very much. So we do the same suspects, the rotating machines, the compressors, right?
Yeah.
Whatever not. So those are 100% on-premise solution, right? So we plot the AI brain into the ship itself. So even without touching the shore, remotely right? The brain is smart enough to figure out what are the errors. It can self-train even on the ship, not connected to the internet. Yeah, so I
Got it.
suspect that more of this will be coming out in the future. So people can build things further away from internet. If you don't want to be connected, you want to feel a bit safer. I suspect more of such remote on-premise solutions will be deployed in the near future.
But then what does it do for because the reason why I asked you that, right, is that there's always a benefit and a detriment to every new solution.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit is like all the speed and all the sort of depth of analysis you can do. And my mind is racing thinking about every little piece of sort of weapon equipment that's on a Navy ship.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just filled with devices, like just filled with it if you just think about it, right? And not just technology devices, but like pistons and little things that are moving and propellers and all these little things, right? So it's super complex. But it also means now if it's sitting on-prem, like what do they do with all that data and how do they sort of manage their data costs as well? And, what do they do for backup and all these other things? Because if as you say, you just let the data flow, one of the biggest issues we have right now, and I don't know if you've seen this stat, but like they in the US now, the construction of data centers outstrips the construction of offices.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And part of the reason why, I mean, obviously is for the compute and the complexity of the compute and the throughput that those AI data centers have, right? But the flip side of that is what do you do with all this data? Even if it's in the cloud, right? Because storage is not free. And on a Navy ship, like how do they manage that? Because they could literally have petabytes of data, yeah?
Yeah. Maybe I can add more color to what I was saying just now.
Yes,
Yeah. Like the membrane layer.
Yep.
So in the near future, what will happen is you start to sort out. Now we already do some form of sorting, right? So we call it good data, bad data, neutral data, right? So bad data are, data that doesn't contribute. Yeah, it's probably clean, but it just doesn't help with training the models.
Got it.
So technically, you don't really want to hold on to that data, right? But now, due to the fear of missing out, everybody just wants to hop all the data.
Yeah.
Right. I think it has to reach a saturation point at some time, right? Whereby people decide that, okay, anything that is way beyond 6 months, I'm just going to delete it anyway. It's not going to help me. Right? People will start to figure it out. So in an industrial setting, especially, right, where sometimes it's physical constraints, you can't build like 10 racks on a ship, right?
That's why I asked.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So how good your sorting algorithms, like the membrane layer is, will help with this. Yeah. Then again, it's really dependent on, the trend that we're seeing is every company views this in a different way. So company A maybe has the same ship, same motor, right? Will view their operating protocols and standards different from ship B, right? So you have to create an AI that can customize itself for every single organization, even every single ship or every single fleet or every single factory itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it has to be some form of dynamic AI that can adjust accordingly, not just something that's static. You push everything to the cloud and you train it there. Yeah. So I don't believe that for vertical industrial AI, I don't believe that it's, cloud is the end all be all, right? It definitely will come back to hybrid. People will talk more about on-prem in the near future. So
yeah, I mean, look, I had a whole conversation with the CTO of Agoda about on-prem versus off-prem, right? There's some things that are way better on premises. There's some things that are better in the cloud. And to be fair, I want to get this guy's name right. David Hennemeyer Hansen, I believe, who's the founder of a company called 38 Signals, said that they've essentially taken all of their stuff out of the cloud and did like this big cost-benefit analysis. And the conclusion that they came to is it saves them like a couple of $1 million a year, I think, to just even with buying the new machines and amortizing it, all the other things that you would normally do if you have it on-prem, that for their business and their size of business, that it makes more sense to do it. So it's not just that you're suggesting that on-prem is the only way to do it. A lot of people are reconsidering what they think about how much stuff goes into the cloud and how much doesn't, yeah?
Yeah, and with all this new data, then you have to make it secure, things like that. So it's additional cost, additional stress, additional manpower, things that you probably don't want to consider as you're scaling a new sector, for example.
Yeah. And I don't even want to talk to you about I don't even want to talk to you about the cybersecurity stuff. You're right, because like the more data you have, the more danger you have of more data getting stolen. I have another question for you though.
Mm-hmm.
What how does the evaluation of the engineer change, right? Because in the old days, meaning 6 months ago, that guy or gal was going to be evaluated on like how many of the problems they solved before it actually started costing the company money. I'm simplifying, but that makes sense, right? But now if they're getting all this data and getting all this analysis, they should have that information days or weeks before they might have noticed otherwise, right? Because of just the scale that you were talking about it. So how do they get evaluated now? And again, that's not your job, but I'm just curious if like you hear chatter around that.
The one thing that really changed is trying to understand deeply about the job versus understanding deeply and broadly about the job. So previously, if you were super deep into your discipline, you were the number one, right? You know all about that error. You can fix it fast, right? You're very technical about it.
Yep.
Now, not so much of that. Now is whether can you zoom out and look at the entire factory, entire fleet.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. If you're able to, go to your bosses, go to the new age managers, and you tell them that, okay, here's how I look at the priority of things, and based on what the AI sorts out, maybe I need to reshuffle a few points. So the new management will appreciate that. Right. So I don't think they will put as much emphasis, not saying that it's not important, but because AI can do some parts of it. Yeah. But if you're able to say that, okay, AI arranged my workflow, these top 5, like I have to buy 5 new ships. But now I'm saying that we only buy 4. Right. So the difference is 100 millions in CapEx, things like that. So that as the demand of a employee today is going to be much different from a demand even 1 year ago.
Yeah,
right, being able to zoom out and think quickly.
I do think it's going to change.
Yeah.
And look, I always like to give the example of when I was working at Goldman and we employed algorithmic trading for the first time. Because it meant that I could do way more trades with way less effort, but then it meant I had to do way more trades, which actually led to way more effort, right? I think the numbers I like to talk about, we used to do like $300 million of trades a day, and then we probably got to like $2 billion of trades a day. Do you know what I mean? So there's just so much more to do. We could handle more customers and stuff like that because the trading was all automated. I wouldn't call it agentic per se, but it wasn't that far away from it. But the nature of our jobs did change a lot in kind of the way you're doing, because what we had to do was kind of zoom out now and say, okay, where do we focus and manage? So yeah, same thing. So one more thing, and then I let you go. I feel like we're at the early innings here of all of this stuff. As you continue to develop your business, as you continue to develop the services that you have and continue to work with AI, where do you see us like 2 to 3 years out? I wouldn't even say 5 to 7 years out, because I don't even think that that's predictable anymore. But where do you see this going, and how quickly do you think we get there?
Wow. For me, it's really agentic AI is the future. We are all in on that. Our company, everybody is in that direction also. So we truly believe that mankind will start to devalue certain jobs, right, for the better, right? So there used to be, like a surveyor role, analyst role, right? There's so many roles involved, right, in trying to check the machines.
Yeah.
I don't think the job will disappear. I think the job will be combined. Yeah, because previously, there's a lot of things they have to do in the 6 hours, but now you compress it, right? You just have to do a few things within the 6 hours.
Got it.
Yeah, and AI, the agentic portion of the whole workflow will be the one that empower this. Yeah, so I just had a customer call me, right? They used to reject us like 2 years ago. I just had a call yesterday.
Please.
Can we relook at this whole workflow?
Please.
Yeah, like I'm missing, like my competitor is doing it. I just read the news.
Yeah.
Can you just come and talk to it? Fly me there, things like that. Yeah. So I don't even think it's 2-3 years, right? I think it's probably in the next 1 year.
Yeah, that's why I said normally I would have asked you like 5 years out or 10 years from now. But the way I was on the phone, I was on the phone with the CTO of a really big company actually before I was talking to you, and he said to me, and we both agreed, like, this is the fastest moving technology cycle we've ever seen by far. Okay.
Yeah. Decision-making cycle.
Yeah, way faster than before. But I do love this idea of this potential customer calling you back and going, okay, I'm in trouble now. Please come and help me.
1 year, just 1 year.
Yeah. But again, you're right. The other customers are now going to get on board, and they're going to think I need to do this in the next like 1 to 3 months, not 1 to 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, Leon. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. I enjoy being here as well. Thank you.
Okay. Khoa, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Look, we wanted to have you on, obviously to talk about Eyes of AI, but to talk about the impact of AI and kind of healthcare in general, and on dentistry in particular. Maybe the best way to start is like, what is the genesis of Eyes of AI? Like, where did this come from? Why did you start it?
Eyes of AI started from a very personal experience.
Go ahead.
So my background is in artificial intelligence and data science. and my brother is a practicing dentist here in Sydney.
Okay, wait a second. That's
Um,
already an unfair advantage. Your
yeah,
brother's a
exactly.
dentist. It's not fair. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So a few years ago, I went to see him for a checkup, and he looked at my X-rays and recommended treatment. And at the time, I didn't fully believe it. I felt fine. There was no pain, and like a lot of patients, I was a bit skeptical as well about what I was seeing on the X-ray and what he was telling me. And being my brother, I really didn't believe him anyway. So about
Because you're like, I remember when you were 3. It's like, anyway, go ahead.
exactly. He's just going to be back for that.
Yeah.
But about 2 months later, I ended up in such severe pain. It was to a point where I was blanking out.
Oh no, that's bad.
Um, yeah, and to a point where I had no choice but to have emergency tooth removal. And that was just a really bad experience. So that moment really stuck with me. It made me realize two things. First, how difficult it is for patients to understand what clinicians are seeing because it's just a black and white image. And the second is how much of diagnosis still relies on interpreting complex images manually. It's all done manually, currently.
Yeah.
So I went away and I built an early AI model that could analyze those same X-rays in seconds, as rather, instead of like the minutes that he took. So that's how Eyes of AI was born.
But what is? Sorry. So first of all, hopefully you did let your brother do the surgery and you thanked him for you were like, sorry, dude, I was wrong. Hopefully that happened. But more importantly, what drives the decision making? So let's say and just in like a one image world of your, dental X-rays. Let's say there was just one image taken or two. You know what I mean? Just to simplify it. What is the actual process? I'm just really curious from a technical standpoint. And then to what is it compared, or what is the basis of the analysis? So that you're right, as a patient, you can have way more confidence, whether it's your brother or not, all joking aside, in the analysis that they're making and then in the recommendation that they make to you for what the next step should be. Do you know what I mean? Like, how would you even know?
Yeah, it's a really kind of, I would say, a really messy situation at the moment. When you go to a dentist, they're required to take your 2D X-rays for screening purposes, so to detect your caries or periodontal disease, and they have a look at it. But the thing is, if you go to different dentists, every dentist would have a different recommendation. And on top of that, when they communicate with you, they only have that black and white image to show you. And so there's always that ambiguity in your mind. And, do you really trust this dentist? Is he telling me something that, I fully, want to do as well? And it's something that I need to do immediately.
Right.
Or is he just saying this because he needs to increase his billing or his revenue?
I'm glad you said that, because that's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to be mean to your brother. Like, do you know what I mean? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. And so, currently the state that we're in, it's all manually completed. It's there's different types of X-rays that clinicians or the dentists take. The most common ones being the 2D X-rays, which we call the either the panoramic, which is the ones that go straight across, or the small films, which focus on particular teeth to kind of isolate the problems.
Yep.
And they're the most frequent ones, but there's not that much information on those X-rays, and it's hard to interpret. So, AI is here, and it's here to analyze those X-rays and provide a communication tool for the clinician and for the patient as well.
But again, what is it making a comparison to, right? So let me give you an example. I had an MRI, God, it must be 20-something years ago now. And it turns out, for me, my brother is a neurosurgeon. So I just sent him photo. I think I sent him photo. I may have actually taken the images and actually sent them to his home, right?
Yeah.
But I think he did the same. And my brother's a really great neurosurgeon in the same way that your brother's probably a really great dentist. But, in the same way, there's not much on those images either. And I could just picture, because I saw my doctor do this in Japan, he just held it up to a light and he was like, you're not going to die, but you may lose the ability to understand language. I'm like, that's a little scary.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah.
But like, so what actually happens to that image when it gets analyzed, and what is the output from it? So that you're right. I remember going to the dentist tons of times when I was a kid, and he would just hold it up and just be like, you have a cavity. Like, I need more than that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what does it do now?
Yeah, so the X-ray image comprises of, black and white
Yep.
pixels. So it's like grayscale, there's black and there's white. There's over 9,000, variations in that scale. And that's what the clinicians are looking for. They're looking for the transparency, the radiolucency in particular areas, which indicates either a caries or, a disease. And depending on the severity of that kind of translucency, it tells them what exactly the diagnosis is. And so human the human eye can only identify a fraction of those 9,000
For sure.
grayscale pixels. And so that's why there's so much variability. The issue is that, clinicians aren't just clinicians, they're business owners, they take care of their team, they're accountants. It's a long, hard,
Yeah.
slog
Yeah.
on a daily basis. And so when you're tired, you're picking up these grayscale images, constantly, you're surely going to miss some. And that's where AI comes in, because now it's going to be unbiased, it's not going to get tired, it's going to give you consistent objective results each and every time. And whether you agree with it or not is a different story. You could think, okay, I'm going to agree with what the AI produces, and I'm going to double check, or I'm just not going to agree with it at all. It's a co-pilot to the clinicians to help them perform a lot better.
So I want to get to that in a second, but I want to ask you something before I do that, because that was going to be my next thing. But do you like functionally put the AI like through dental school and make them, you know what I mean, show them tons and tons and tons of photos of teeth in different places and different, different light, all this kind of stuff, so that they can finally understand like what that actually is when they see it and they make some kind of comparison to it? Is that what they're doing functionally?
Yeah, exactly. So it's called training the AI models. So the
Yep.
AI models have to see exactly what the pathology looks like, hundreds of thousands of times, for it to understand that this is indeed, that particular type of pathology. So that requires you to collect data that represents the population, represents the demographics, and then you have to annotate that data to tell the AI that this is indeed, the pathology. And you
Right.
have to annotate that across all those images. So you're essentially training, putting the AI models through school, and telling them this is what it is. And they just gradually get more, intelligent over time.
Yeah, I mean, just like a human would. But how do you balance this idea? And I'd love to talk to your brother about this too, or someone like your brother, who have up until now not had this type of tooling available to them. And you're right, they get tired or whatever, but they still, as they grow and learn, they get way better at looking at those grayscale pixels and saying, this is what I believe that pathology is, right? But then how do you
Yep.
balance this idea? Because you said you may or may not agree with it, but if you don't agree with it, or even if you do, like, how do they understand the balance between this is like not dogma per se, and I have to somehow balance between all of my own existing human experience plus what this thing is telling me, and then make a decision on it? Or are they just going with the AI and being like, that dude's definitely right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think there's a lot of biases, in interpreting X-rays. There's the confirmation bias. You believe a certain thing when you see a particular person, and when you look at the X-ray, you're just there to confirm what you believe.
Right,
There's,
right.
other types of biases that exist within a dental practice. And so that's why there's such a big problem at the moment. The number of uh, cases where individuals have tooth decay is enormous. It's like 50% of the global population has some sort of oral disease, whether it be
Oh no.
mild or severe. Yeah, it's humongous, and that itself can lead on to other chronic health conditions. So it's a big market. It's a big area that can be improved. And I think, yeah, this generation has the opportunity to kind of step in, and that's what we're trying to do. We're just going to step in and improve the health outcomes for the patients.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about the patient response to this type of stuff too, right? Like, I would love to go see a dentist now who has all these AI enabled tools, and then says, here's exactly what we're looking at, and here's like the percentage of people that have like all this information that you'd want to have as a patient. Does it make the patient experience better as well?
Yeah, from our clinical testing and feedback, we've had a really, I guess, positive outcome from that. Patients love seeing their particular areas that are highlighted. So not necessarily that requires treatment, but there's areas that that can be improved upon. Like, for example, you need to make sure that you need to brush this area a lot better. And they just like to see the results on screen. That facilitates, in more important conversations, like when you need to come back, what you need to do to take care of all these issues. It's a lot more engaging, from what we found, to what it was, currently in the market where there's no AI in place.
Where does it fit into the workflow? Like, what does it look like to a patient? And do they know that this is going on? Do they know that, like, the dentist is actually using, or the clinician at the dentist office is actually using this AI-enabled tools? Like, what does it look like? Where does it fit in? How do they know?
Yeah, I mean, that's an important a moat that we've really focused on, is embedding our systems within the whole workflow, to make sure that the clinicians don't have to extract the image and then upload it to a separate platform and then kind of fiddle around with their PC and their screen and that kind of stuff. So for us, it's about embedding it into the whole workflow, and kind of ensuring that the patients have that continuous interaction with their clinicians.
It must be a much better experience. So where are we going from here, right? I mean, none of this stuff is static, right? Like, it never just stops getting developed. Where are we going from here? What's going to get better? What's on the roadmap? And how does the development of AI itself, agentic AI or generative AI, impact what you're building?
I think initially, the use of existing data sets and the use of those data sets to build the foundational initial models is important. But gradually, as we expand into the future, as AI gets more sophisticated, there's the kind of the ability to develop additional synthetic data, which improves the detection of the models. So that's where I believe things are going. That's where I believe the market's going. I think the ability to capture everything and get all the data in the world is really difficult. So having the ability to generate new data sets to highlight pathologies or cancers that are really rare and that we can't get data for,
right?
And to make those detections more accurate, I think that's exactly where we're headed.
Okay, one more thing, just because it's interesting to me. What was the likelihood when you were growing up that your brother's dentistry career was going to overlap or intersect with your AI and data career?
Yeah, it was just very unlikely. We worked together well, but I'm in a totally different field, and just so happened that it just I just went to see him, and the tooth pain came about, and eventually he didn't do the emergency surgery. He's a work colleague did it because he was in Canberra, but
Got it.
but it's just it was really, really nice to be able to kind of work on the initial prototypes with my brother.
That's super cool.
Yeah, but now we're working with the CSIRO, Sydney University, and the Sydney Dental School as well. So there's a lot of kind of stakeholders in place.
Awesome. Okay, what a great story. What a great idea. Thank you so much for doing this today, Khoa. I really appreciate your time.
That's all right.
Okay, that's it for ATP Insights today. Thank you again for joining us. Give us a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Follow us on all of our socials, on X, on Instagram, and on LinkedIn. Let us know in the comments if there's anything you would like us to discuss on our upcoming shows. We really want to do some AMA style stuff again. Send us questions on any of our socials, anywhere you want. My name is Michael Waits. Bye for now.